Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast. I'm excited today to be here with Rhonda Parker. She's a suspense author, and you might say, what in the world? Why are we interviewing a suspense author for a leadership podcast? But Rhonda, through all of her experience, has started and founded a company called Intelligence Solutions, and she provides training to executives, to businesses, to people that are looking to change what they're doing, and she has a tremendous amount of experience. We might get a little bit into how the novel falls into that. Rhonda, welcome, and I'll let you give a little bit better of an introduction than what I did, but welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate, you entertaining a different philosophy on leadership because, we've been talking a little bit, and I'm not your traditional leader. A lot of times people think, why should I listen or follow your advice or even consider any kind of new growth pattern? There's so many models out there. Well, my path has been anything but straight. It's gone and pivoted 100 times. It is the story and the journey of you igniting energy and success, no matter what life throws you, what curveball you get. I started out in an entrepreneurial family that started in a barn, so I know what it's like to bend steel, bag feet, get on a paint line in manufacturing, then grow to where, you're not the worker, you're the leader, you're the manager, the supervisor, and then leave the cuckoo nest and go and spread my butterfly wings to learning how to really develop people from a knowledge base, and then realizing as I'm going through that, because I have a doctorate in leadership, that even if you're not the brightest bulb in the bunch, you're not, the IQ of a genius, you can be successful if you just know how to navigate emotions and make concrete decisions, which is the most important aspect of leadership. So when I started reading some of Daniel Goleman's books and some of the, the knowledge-based aspects of emotional intelligence, I had to jump right in and pause myself and say, okay, what can I learn and how can I apply it, not only to myself, but to others, to be the best that we can be and make sure we evolve beyond the limits that we put on ourselves.
Absolutely. That is an amazing story. And it did bring a question to mind. You mentioned you started in an entrepreneurial family and eventually spread your butterfly wings and got out and started doing other things to see the world, maybe from a different angle. And in today's world, I don't know what the number is, but I believe people change careers 5-6 times in a lifetime. And sometimes we think that's a terrible thing, but in today's world and from your experiences, do you think maybe that's a good thing that people get out and try different things and kind of see where they're going to end? And you may not have the experiences to be the leader that you want to be until you try different things. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with that, as long as it's not a crutch for not pushing through for the victory. See, many times people fly off and leave an organization disgruntled, refusing to grow, not aligning themselves with the purpose of the organization, wanting their own purpose. So you have to look at what it is. Why are you leaving? Are you leaving because life has created a new dream that you want to align with, or because you want to walk in intention and walk in victory, and maybe the position you're in right then is not? Like, I had an organization early in my career that everybody in management was 40. And it was a healthy, loving, wonderful environment. So where am I going to grow to?
Yep.
All the Ps, the CEOs, everybody was young. So unless we, grew in the width, there was no more opportunity. So in that case, I was like, okay, it's time for me to move on. And that's when I joined our family business for the, I'll say second time. That was a baby, and then went back and became the HR director because that's what my background was in. So I think that, as long as the inspiration is to align with a mission and a vision, hopping just a hop can create a knowledge base because you don't know maybe where you want to be, and that's okay, but it doesn't create a self-discovery model for yourself. It just means you're going and learning a new job. You're not becoming a career mindset. You're just wanting the next best gig.
Yep. And you mentioned your mission and your vision. That's something that we push here at McCoy Leadership. I believe everybody, whether you're a CEO or you're just starting out and you're working in the floor or on the floor in a manufacturing facility, you need to have a mission and a vision. You need to understand where you want to go and make sure your decisions are matching up to that. So, I think what you're saying is check your motives and see why are
Right.
you making the decisions you're making. And many times, I know I have experienced it, even myself. I'm sure we all have. Sometimes you go for the extra money, or you think there's some freedom involved in a new position, or what have you. And if it doesn't fit your mission, it's not going to help you get to where you want to be. So
You have to set a sight on something. What is it? What's that vision going to be? So you're right. You have to set that from the beginning.
So, what we wanted to talk about today was making tough decisions, and I think I probably need to make sure I take notes because sometimes tough decisions, well, they're tough, right? Um,
We don't make them because we want to most of the time. Most of the time, it's like a game of uncle. You put your hands out there, and you got your little systems and everything, and you're holding hands and pulling each other's knuckles, and then eventually you have to change because if you don't, you're going to be in non-existence. So no, we normally don't just jump out of the gate and say, "Let's change today," but you should.
yep. I often tell people, specifically when you're dealing with large groups of people, they don't necessarily fear change. They have a fear of loss because they think the change is going. They fear the loss of whatever it is that you're changing. But from all of your experiences in leadership, HR, entrepreneurial, how do you personally approach making a difficult decision in a high stakes situation?
Feel first, act wisely.
Okay.
Because if you go into a situation thinking about change, if you don't feel the emotions in the room, what the processes are and how people feel about them, if you don't feel first, what is that priority that you're going to do in a change? And then pause before you proceed. When you pause, you can get people's input. You can see how they're reacting to even the thought of change. You can't get any buy-ins until you've done that. Take that moment to check in with yourself. Are you making the change because it's needed for the organization? Is there emotion in you somewhere that's making you do that change? Because by golly, this didn't work today, and we have, so many parts that didn't work out right, or we're not making our sales goals, and let's just throw this process out and do it. That doesn't work. So if you feel first, act wisely, it allows you to do an internal scan and an external scan and acknowledge your emotions about what you're seeing. If you can't acknowledge it yourself, if you don't have some kind of self-discovery, how are you going to lead anybody else through it? How are you going to open up your ears to hear what others have to say about it? What's working, what's not working. So that's why that feel first, act wisely is so important. And put logic in the guide for it. And then pause. Why I say pause after that is because you need to take a moment and gather data. We're a data-driven world anymore. When I say data, you can get it from your computers, you can get it from your people, you can find out why you have to make this tough call.
So you're suggesting, one, we should care about what reaction we're getting out of people. And so calling a 5-minute meeting, dropping a complete change that changes the momentum of the company and saying, deal with it and walk out. That's not a strategy.
It's not a strategy unless there's an emergency. If you have fire trucks around the building, you're getting ready to have a huge lawsuit because you're not doing something correctly. You're not doing legal procedures or, whatever. The policies aren't, is an emergency that requires a direct action now without any thought. Then maybe go drop the bomb in, because you have to. But any other decision or change is just not that critical to be done that way. Because if you unlock and clarify what the real problem is, you're going to fix the symptom, not the problem. You have to bite up the chain. You might see that 100 letters are going out, to every client you have, and they're all wrong and everything like that. But that may just be a symptom. The problem is the programming, or the problem is whatever has happened to create that symptom. So you've got to take the time to find out what the real problem is. And if you don't gather the information from people, then what ends up happening is you're making a flawed decision based on your impression, your perception, your thoughts. So if you take that moment to check in and say, hey, this is a symptom that we're seeing. We're not sure if it's the full problem. Tell us your processes. Tell us what's going on. Our sales have dropped 50%. What do you think what's causing that? Then you're unlocking your empathy to get clarity from those that do the job every day. And when you unlock and you acknowledge not only your emotions about it, and you can say, I'm worried about 50% drop in sales this month because it's an unsustainable model, but I don't know where the problem began, started, etc. Then you can get the logic from the people, and you can get the perspective of the full picture, because it may be multiple symptoms that's causing it.
So the leader that comes in, or ask the question a different way, have you encountered leaders that are terrible at doing this but think they're good at it?
Oh, definitely.
So how important is it as a leader that we take time to, one, understand what lens we view everything through, and understanding our own emotions and understanding our personality? How important is that before you even step into this?
I used to tell my father, and he's one of the first entrepreneurs that I would have ever, had encountered, that he had no empathy. And he was like, what, you don't know what you're talking about. Who cares about it? It's not an important part of the model for leadership. And then when I did my emotional intelligence test, I asked him to be one of the emotional intelligence and domestic leaders, because we were doing multinational leaders and domestic leaders, those that worked in one country and those that did more than one country. And he said he would. And then we got his results back, and he was about a score of a 0 on empathy. I guess you're right. And so then we started looking at what that meant and what he was seeing in his model. And he realized that cool heads mean a warm heart, which requires an approach that's balanced with rational. So empathy equates to being rational. A lot of people look at empathy as though you're a bleeding heart.
Yep.
But when you have rational, cool heads in the room, thinking and compassion for how it affects everybody, the compassion piece, then what you end up getting is signals from everybody where they stand on it that truly matter. Because you stopped and you've paused and you feel first and act wisely. It's as easy as allowing someone to deconstruct their own opinion before you tell them your opinion. When you let destruct themselves and what they think about it, some people don't think fast on their feet.
Yep. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, Stephen Covey and his talk about the third alternative. You're never going to get to the third alternative if you can't get past, or if you can't understand and read the signals of the people around you. Is kind of what I'm thinking. So, again, back on the emotional intelligence, would you agree or believe that working on that, understanding that, ultimately is going to improve any CEO or manager's ability to be able to make good decisions? Staying cool.
Yes, definitely. Go ahead, finish up. I apologize. I cut you off. I got so excited.
No, understanding emotional intelligence, staying cool, watching the signals of the people that are involved in the process, and then pausing, I think it was your next step.
Mm-hmm.
And then carefully considering all the possibilities that are there, and then formulating what you're going to do going forward. So, the question is, if you're doing all of those things, whether you're a CEO, a manager, or you're a stay-at-home mom, this is going to help you become a better decision maker, right?
Because you're managing the emotions first. And so we've kind of talked about the intrapersonal skills by managing your own self. But then you go into the interpersonal skill. And what you do then is you start listening beyond the words, where you get to understand without jumping to conclusions and assumptions. So when you listen beyond the words, the goal is to understand the emotions of the people in the room, whether it be your small child, whether it be, the CEO. And when you understand what's driving those emotions and the situation, then you can respond in a certain way, but don't react yet, because you still have to ask questions. See, you're trying to pull all the information out, not get everybody to shut down. Okay, you shared your opinion. Okay, you've had your 2-word sense of whatever you think on the problem. Now I'm going to make this decision, and you drop the bomb. No, you don't react yet. You start asking questions. Don't assume you know the answers. Let's say you're talking about a process. You start with, maybe you want to start with the most important thing to you, the money, the growth, or whatever, the accounting department. But then maybe you want to start with the customer. You decide where you're going to go with it, and you ask them, okay, so we're talking about this. What do you think? And what do you think the conclusion is if we change this process or we make these moves? And then you can lead with awareness. You should have every department person, whether it's breakfast with the CEO, whether it's breakfast with the consulting team, whether every department, every major unit should have a seat at the table to tell you how you should act and how you should respond. And then when you're leading with awareness, you also have the self-awareness of what you need the organization to do. You know not only what they need for them to be successful, but you know what also you need for the organization to be successful, which is growth, profit, um, social responsibility, all the things that align with your mission of your organization or even yourself.
Yep.
Do you live your integrity? And by navigating tough choices in this way, you've moved from the intrapersonal, which is the self deconstruction, and not just running in and changing on an emotion that has no bearing yet, that you don't even have real understanding to interpersonal decision making, which involves everybody. And then you can move to the next step, which is stress management of the change. When you can do that stress management of the change, you can have the power of why to help people change. You can use any model you want to, the freeze, unfreeze, you can do diagrams, you can create, but you have the power of the why. You're moving in this direction because of X. You've clarified the intentions from not only your perspective, but the least amongst us. And then you have the power of the why to be able to say, okay, we're making this decision, this emotional change by an informed process by you. Yes, there's going to be bumps. Let's map it out. And then it doesn't consume everybody, and that you don't have a command performance relationship. It's not a transactional decision. It's a group decision that realizes that you've used the data, you've used the feelings, you've used the emotions in the room to point out where the issue is, found the true problem, not a symptom. And then you're not doing a directive. You're saying, okay, let's clarify our intentions. Let's make the processes. What are the outcomes? What are the risks? And listen to those risks that are associated, that people concern. How are we going to do it? And think long before, and just before you make the decision. Because just because it makes you more profitable doesn't necessarily mean it's just and that it's going to be accepted. So you have to look at the long-term effects of the decision and what it's going to do to the culture of the organization. Does it change it?
So along those steps, I'm thinking about all the people I've ever encountered throughout my life, and I'm picturing some that are saying, all right, I can buy into, getting good information, working my way through what the input is from my team, coming up with a great idea, and then letting it out there. And then I can hear some people saying, why do I care if they're stressed out or not? We made a decision together. They need to do it. So kind of a twofold question. One, where is the stumbling block in this process that you see most people getting stuck on? And what is the impact of only doing part of it? If you only get the first 3 steps and you do that really well, but you don't do any of the rest of it, what is that impact of the overall change or overall organization? And then,
but I think the main thing that it shows is what kind of leader you are.
yes.
What you're known for. If you stop at step 1 and it's a directive approach, okay, I come in, I throw the bomb, or I get a little, I just want to show that, I'm going to take a little bit of information. Then you throw the bomb and it's a directive. That tells you that you're a transactional leader. That tells you what you value. So then if they get stuck, that's the relationship you're going to have in your culture. Everybody's going to be transactional, throwing bombs at each other. and making changes without considering the department. Have you ever had a manager make a decision and then didn't go and talk to another department that it um, has some kind of impact on, and then so they make the changes, great for their department, but then all of a sudden you got twice as much work in another department. You've got to figure out how to do the mess. Well, so that's what's going to happen if you don't go to the step 2. You have a transactional relationship that hasn't blossomed into transformation. So then if you go to the second step, you're getting everybody's opinion and you're doing that. You're moving into a more transformational leadership where you're getting the pieces put back into the process a little bit better. And you're getting into the intrapersonal part of it. But guess what? You're not getting into the risk and the uncertainty and the things that will happen if you don't work on that aspect of your culture of the decision making, which is that ability to create the change and synergy back by refreezing and allowing people to go back to a process that works. But there's one more step that we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, what's that?
And that's general mood. If you don't go through all the steps and get all the way to the general move of positivity or negativity and get everybody to buy into it, the culture of the organization fails. You get burnout, rust out, anger, and turnover because you've not made it through the whole decision-making process using an emotionally stable way of looking at your decision making. If you don't make it all the way to addressing the general mood and winning and losing and the victories that you share and how you address the negative parts of things in your organization that has to do with the change and get to that general mood where it's more of a positive, more the stress management part of it's being done, what you're doing is you're embracing the ambiguity of the organization and still making it uncertain where people are like, oh my goodness, we're changing. And what happens when we change? Oh my goodness, that means 1,000 jobs are going to be ended. And then the rumor mill takes over and your grapevine takes over and everybody's running scared.
Doesn't sound like much fun.
No, so you have to make sure that you're still unleashing a culture at the end of the chain of events and change that is where courage meets the transformation in a positive mood that allows people to still feel like they are part of the mission and the vision. How does it all fit back into the piece that we're trying to do? Okay, there's going to be 1,000 more hours because we implemented this technology. What happens to my job? Where do I fit? What's going to happen? What kind of training am I going to need? Why are we answering these questions in the decision-making process?
So a couple of things. One, I'm working with a client now that they had a CEO that left. He was only there a few months. So the past CEO had retired. They got a new CEO. He left. There was really nobody to backfill that position. So now you have an entire staff of folks that have no leader, no vision, they have an idea of what their vision, maybe should be, but that's individualized. And now you have, 6 different people that maybe have a slightly different vision and they're all trying to do their part. And so my question is thinking about those types of situations. When you come into a situation where it's obvious that all of these things have not been happening, and so in my example, what would be the practical steps you would take to get everybody back together and, started down that road? Because sometimes when leaders are coming into new positions, there's already distrust. There's already questions about them. And so would you change any of this or not necessarily change it, but add anything to it for those leaders that are coming into already a tough situation or a bad situation? Because many times as a consultant, when we get called to come help, there's already a bad situation, you know. So what are your thoughts on that?
You need to turn the fear into the fuel.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, when you turn the fear into fuel, first of all, you need to know what before they even think about hiring a third person now, there should have been a succession plan already there. So that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be talked about with those that are there. We know you've been through a hard time. Tell us the problems of the organization. Why do you think this person left so quickly? You know, what happened? And what is the vision as you see it, and create the vision based on what the people that are there, because they're going to be the fuel to get you through the next person. The next person's going to have a 2-year curve to get up to speed, at least at a CEO level. So yes, they can go in and they can roar and make changes and do but you got to start the model all over again. You got to go back to step one, deconstruct. Where are we at? What's going on? Why do we need this? The board needs to do it. The consultant needs to do it. Somebody needs to find out what's going on in the organization that a CEO left that quickly. Now, there could be reasons that aren't culture oriented of the organization, but it could also be that the journey to resilience wasn't built into the model to begin with because they had no succession plan. Everybody else thought maybe they'd get the position. Everybody else thought, okay, you know, we're going to get a person that's exactly like the one we love. And, you know, the kumbaya moment. And that person came in and they're, a Bobby Knight kind of a personality throwing chairs. You know, you don't know what's fueling that fear. And you need stability in the organization. And the people that are going to give you the stability are the ones that are there.
Yep.
Then once you know what the vision is, then you can talk about if there's room and adaptability and flexibility, what would be the next step? And then you can find the leader that's going to lead the organization based on the vision that's there and that can navigate changes knowing where they're coming into. They know that the vision that everybody sees is this fearless story, like in the case of my father, you know, he had to put a plan together of who was going to be next in succession, and he had 5 kids. So is it going to be a kid? Is it going to be an outsider? Who was it going to be? And to add the continuity, my youngest brother, who was almost identical leadership wise to him, was the succession plan.
Yep.
Now he had another son that was equally capable, had run many plants around the United States in the manufacturing field, but he picked the one that was similar to his leadership style because it caused less chaos for the organization. Was it right? Was it wrong? It really depends on what the vision for the organization was. He didn't want it to change. He wanted it to stay a family-owned business. He didn't want the big corporate organization, you know, all of those things that would have probably been what my older brother that had the big corporate environmental mindset would have taken it to. It might have had more growth. There might have been bigger salaries. There might have been other things, but you have to know what the vision is and everybody else's mindset. It was too early for that. Because in that particular organization's case, he still had people that had worked for him since they were 15, 16, 17 years old in a barn that had helped him grow it, that would not have fit the culture of that large organization without considering the people. The one thing he always said to us is it's not about your passion all the time. It's about the people you employ.
Yep.
And families that you're supporting through whatever, the salary, benefits, etc. And you have to be fearless in that storytelling of what the next leader is going to be like. And it's almost like reading the 10 Commandments. There was an oracle version in history that nobody read back then, so they would tell you the stories orally to make sure that people followed those traditions. Well, there's the same thing. Every organization has a tradition that you have to understand, and if you don't fit that, it's going to be a very rough road.
Yes. I've always believed, I mean, an organization is an extension of all the people that are there. It's a living, breathing thing. And, and when that mix of people change, sometimes things change. Or sometimes the vision needs to change at that point once you've changed those people. Switching gears slightly, you are a suspense author. You wrote a book called Crossroads, and that book explores suspenseful, life-altering scenarios. And my question is, did your experience as a writer influence the way you think about key decision-making moments in real life?
Oh, definitely it does, because I wrote the book because I wanted to be the best version of me.
Okay.
And found, because that was one of my weaknesses. One of my first proposals in management had a typo, and I used the wrong insure. And even though they implemented the $1 million project and bought all the technology, and we went through all that, my superior called me in and said, "Do you realize that you used the wrong insure in that proposal?" And I knew that I had to be the best version of me, not only work wise, but for me. But then when I got into the novel and started writing it and found a passion for it, I realized I was also transforming as I did it. I was learning how my brain worked more. I realized that for me, I needed to get things out quickly, verbally, typing, visually. And so my mistakes and the things that I missed was because I didn't sit in it long enough. I didn't do that pause.
Yep.
After I got it down. So in the writing process, you have to keep on getting opinions. You have to keep on, you usually get beta readers. And, I started with my sister, then I went to a conference and got other writers in fiction. And you keep on improving the product. Authorship is an art, but it's also a product. And the first draft is the prototype.
Okay.
And then once you get that prototype done, and someone gets with those measures and and starts pulling apart and looking at it, you realize your tolerances aren't right, that your quality is sucks, and you're not going to be able to produce it at the rate that you need to. So the same thing is with your book, or your authorship. When you feel first, you get it all out. When you then pause and then proceed, you get the details in. And then when you ask for the feedback, you start developing a more rounded product. And you realize where your eyes or your thoughts were wrong. So it really actually I feel like it made me a better leader and a better business person, because I realized, wait a minute, this works in every scenario that I've ever come to. It doesn't matter whether it's education, whether it's training, whether it's CEOs, whether it's leadership. If you listen beyond the words, and there's a lot of words in a novel, then you're also, getting to the core of your own vulnerability in it. You're transferring And in the case of Crossroads, I took pain of the process and made it, the purpose and practical resilience of finishing it, and not just starting it and putting it down. And then I accepted the vulnerability that if I put this out, and there's going to be some people that like it and some people that don't, I could get that emotional connection with people and have, comfort in the fact that I put out the best product for my first one. Will it be the best I ever wrote? I had someone tell me, no, this will not be the best novel you ever wrote. You'll write better ones.
Very interesting. I won't lie. I expected the answer to that question to be slightly different than what it was, and I find that fascinating. Just that you were able to apply the, I'm going to say, the laws that you have developed, into that other process, and actually made myself a note that, when we're talking about things, the difference between a management style, something that is I'll say a one-off, is that the things that become everlasting or things that can be applied in multiple different facets of our life. And so, your scenario worked the same in the novel, and it helped you to bring that around. So, as we're coming to a close, I have two questions that I ask every guest. And the first one is, what is your go-to management or leadership book that you have had over the years and you have continually went back to?
The Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Because what I find every time I read something that has anything to do with it is it allows me to step not only in my own shoes, but other shoes.
Yes.
To see where I might have to improve. And it also gives me the courage to say, hey, you can change some of those behaviors that you found that are weak or need to be strengthened. And I can use that feeling of, hey, I want to be more inspirational, or, hey, I need to be more technical, or whatever that data that comes back to me. And I can think about it and say, okay, how am I going to put that in practice? And I do that with all the 13 dimensions every 3 years of life balance, because I think that if you deconstruct, you're cultivating resilience, not only of yourself, but your relationships and your organization.
So the last question is, what is, and I chuckle a little bit. I just found out about some new to me technology. Technology is just constantly, it seems like, coming at us faster and faster. So what is your go-to piece of technology that you use the most?
My phone, surprisingly, and not enough. And, probably, even though I'm not as good at the 365's team part of it, but the idea through Zooms and StreamYard and all of these technologies that allow us to interconnect and save time, energy, and still allow you to see the other person in the room, has been invaluable to me to growing as an individual, because I've realized that I'm embracing the technology and finding purpose in the ability of reaching people and getting more out of them without having to follow them around, 24/7. It's very easy to do it through a phone.
Yes. If you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be sitting in an office producing a podcast with people from around the world from Pennsylvania, I would have said that's impossible. That's crazy. And here we all are. So I said that was the last question. I lied. We got one other really important question. Where can people find out more about you?
But they can find, I try to make it easy for everybody. RhondaParkerTaylor.com. and that has all the links for all the social media. All the social media is RhondaParkerTaylor.com. Even Intelligent Solutions is going under RhondaParkerTaylor.com because it's easy. You know who I am, and you know my organizations, and it's easy to find me that way. I love people to follow this podcast because you're getting good tips on that, and realize that your power comes from the network that you have. And when you have a good network and good people to sound things off of, you're going to grow.
Yes. One of my just recent guests, and I believe it was actually the podcast that I dropped last week, but he had a quote that has stuck with me, and I believe he said somebody in his life had told him that in 5 years from now, you will be the exact same person that you are today, except for the books you read and the people you interact with. And that just stuck with me. So
that is very true. That is a very good quote.
So we will add your information in the show notes when we release the podcast, and we just appreciate you coming on and spending a little bit of time with us. And for our listeners, until next time, don't forget to check us out on social media, as well as our website at McCoyleadership.com. And we can't wait to bring you the next episode.